The American flag, torn, tossed like trash in a roadside ditch, was all Frank had left of his past. Then, under the eerie glow of dawn, a convoy of tanks and soldiers rolled quietly onto his suburban street. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The morning of July 4th broke crisp and golden, with the kind of sunlight that usually made Frank Delaney pause a moment longer on the porch, hand wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug, steam rising like a ghost between his weathered knuckles. But today, there was no pause, no breath, no coffee, just silence, taut as a tripwire. Frank stood at attention at the edge of his lawn, his spine impossibly straight for a man his age, his silhouette stark against the soft suburban blur of hydrangeas and garden gnomes. The flagpole was bare, not bent or broken, just empty. The absence of the flag was louder than any explosion the night before. Scout, his old Labrador mix, sat quietly beside him, ears alert but unmoving, sensing the gravity his human couldn't speak. Across the street, neighbors peeked through blinds. A few stepped onto porches, unsure whether to approach. Mrs. Cunningham, from 3 doors down, clutched her pearls like a lifeline, whispering something to her husband, who simply removed his baseball cap and held it to his chest. Word had spread quickly. The video, smeared in adolescent laughter and digital arrogance, had already looped through the town's Facebook groups and local next-door threads like wildfire. But Frank hadn't seen it. He didn't need to. He felt it, like a punch to the gut that comes just after you've been told the war is over. Something sacred had been desecrated, and the silence in its wake was suffocating. He didn't move for a long time, not when the mailman crossed the street to hand-deliver a letter and instead paused, hat off, standing with him for a full 60 seconds in shared reverence. Not when a young mother walked her toddler past and whispered, "That's the man I told you about, the real hero." Not even when Scout whimpered, pressing his body gently into Frank's leg, as if to say, "I'm still here. It's just us now." The ritual had been broken, and in breaking it, something inside Frank had shifted. At 9:00 a.m., a cruiser from the sheriff's department rolled slowly into the neighborhood. Deputy Lisa Morales stepped out, lips pressed into a tight line. She was young, maybe 30, but her eyes were the color of tired. She approached carefully, removing her sunglasses as she did. "Mr. Delaney," she said gently. "Sir." Frank's eyes didn't leave the pole. "We've identified the boys. We're handling it." Still nothing. Just the sound of cicadas warming up in the trees and the faint tap of Scout's tail on the driveway. Lisa cleared her throat. "Would you like to press charges?" Finally, Frank turned. His face was stone, but his eyes, those deep gray-blue eyes, burned with something older than rage, something more final. "No," he said. Lisa blinked. "Sir? I won't need the law for this." And with that he turned and walked inside, Scout following closely behind. The screen door creaked closed. No one saw him again that day, but the next morning before the sun could crest the horizon, the flagpole stood restored, polished, ground recompacted. The flag was still gone, but something new fluttered in its place, a folded sheet of plain white cloth, strung halfway up, the fabric stiff with deliberate tension. It wasn't a surrender. It was a warning. Frank Delaney didn't seek pity. He didn't accept condolences or platitudes. He had no tolerance for sugar-coated empathy or soft-spoken offers of moving on. What had been taken from him wasn't fabric or ceremony. It was a promise, a covenant between generations, a line of blood and sacrifice that the boys had spit on without even understanding the weight of their mockery. The recovery of the flag, mud-stained, torn but intact, was a miracle by chance and a quiet act of honor by Private Angela Deeks, who had grown up 2 towns over and had a father buried at Arlington. She hadn't waited for orders. She drove out that night, combed the side roads, found it bald near a drainage pipe, and delivered it in person, still damp, folded gently into her arms as though she carried a wounded comrade. Frank accepted it with a single nod. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply took it inside and refolded it the Marine Corps way, triangular, tight, and sacred. By July 6th, something had hardened in him. The neighbors sensed it. The way Frank moved now, deliberate, mechanical, sent a chill through the warm summer haze. There were no small-talk exchanges from his porch, no slight nods to passing joggers, just the sound of a hammer striking wood late into the night. They didn't know what he was building, and no one dared ask. Meanwhile, the boys, Trent, Kyle, and Brody, still strutted through the neighborhood with adolescent bravado, their laughs sharper now, defensive, thinner. But the laughter didn't reach their eyes. They were no longer emboldened by anonymity. The whole town had seen the footage before it vanished, had memorized the voices and the faces. Their names, whispered behind hands, hung in the air like smoke. And then there were the parents, defensive, entitled, suddenly eager to shift blame. Kyle's father, Councilman Rayner, appeared on the local news claiming generational misunderstandings and overreaction from a deeply respected but emotionally unstable veteran. He used words like symbolic miscommunication, positioning the theft of a burial flag as if it were some confused art project. The clip aired once. The backlash was immediate. Veterans from nearby counties began arriving, quiet men and women in faded fatigues, some limping, some with medals pinned to denim jackets, who said nothing but stood at the edge of Frank's yard, hands over hearts. They came without invitation, without banners, without spectacle. The street turned into a silent line of sentinels by sundown. Frank didn't address them. He didn't have to. Inside, his home changed. He moved the old footlocker out from the closet, the one that hadn't been opened in decades. He laid out photographs, letters, medals, a bullet-pierced helmet, a field knife, still sheathed. Every item laid with care on the dining table, not as nostalgia, but as evidence. Not for himself, but for something gathering within him, a slow, rising anger that took shape in order, in discipline, in resolve. This wasn't grief anymore. It was purpose forged in violation. By the evening of July 7th, Frank added a second flagpole, thicker, taller, planted with cement and steel cable reinforcement. No flag flew on it yet, but the sight of it, illuminated by floodlights he hadn't used in years, cast a long shadow across the boys' homes. It wasn't a threat. It was a beginning. The viral surge was instantaneous and brutal. Within hours, the quiet cul-de-sac became a national stage. News crews parked on manicured lawns, cameras zooming in on Frank's weathered face, his sharp salute cutting a silent defiance against a backdrop of military armor and fluttering stars and stripes. The footage leaked to every corner of the internet, clips of a resolute old Marine reclaiming what was sacred, flanked by solemn soldiers, a community watching in collective breath-hold. The story didn't just catch attention, it ignited it. Beneath the spectacle, an undercurrent of accountability surged with a force that no courtroom or council chamber could command. The National Guard's official silence about the boys' identities was an intentional formality, but anonymity dissolved the moment social media users pieced together familiar faces, names, and neighborhoods. The streets where the teens once strutted with careless arrogance were flooded with calls and messages of outrage and condemnation. At their schools, administrators scrambled to contain a tidal wave of pressure. Parents of other students demanded swift discipline. Teachers whispered of the fractured trust. School boards, wary of public image, placed the boys' records under immediate review. Trent's scholarship, once a gleaming ticket to a future far from small-town shadows, was rescinded with no ceremony. An invisible but devastating blow. The college cited conduct unbecoming, referencing the incendiary video as proof of character. Kyle's father, a once powerful city councilman buoyed by campaign donors, watched as support evaporated. Corporate sponsors pulled their logos from his campaign ads, his once secure political future crumbling beneath the weight of public scorn. Boardroom phone calls terminated abruptly. Donors withdrew quietly but decisively. The city council meeting room that had felt like a second home grew colder, filled with hostile glances and thinly veiled accusations. Brody's mother, the last to break, issued a statement of contrition. It was measured, formal, crafted carefully for the cameras. Her words spoke of regret, of misguided children, of lessons painfully learned, but the apology rang hollow in the face of the damage done. Yet even this gesture fell short of breaking through the fortress Frank had erected around himself. Frank never acknowledged the uproar. He did not bask in the public vindication or capitalize on the humiliation of those who had wronged him. Instead, he retreated deeper into the quiet dignity that had defined him long before the flag was stolen or recovered. His satisfaction was private, carved from years of discipline and sacrifice, unshaken by the chaos swirling beyond his front porch. One evening, nearly a week later, a small, worn envelope appeared beneath his door, unmarked, unannounced. The paper was creased, the ink faded and shaky, the handwriting unmistakably youthful and uncertain. Inside, a letter folded with hesitant care, words written not with bravado, but remorse. I didn't understand what that flag meant. I was stupid. I'm sorry. I hope someday I can earn back the respect I threw away that night. Trent. Frank held the letter quietly, the creases softening beneath his fingers as if absorbing the weight of a lifetime's lessons distilled into a single page. He folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer beside the medals that bore silent witness to battles far removed from this suburban war. Then, as if to anchor himself, he turned his gaze outward. Through the window, the restored flag rippled gently in the summer breeze, unwavering and proud, its colors vibrant, resilient, the symbol intact. Frank did not write back. He didn't need to, because the entire country, in its own way, had already responded.